All right. Sorry about that, guys. We had a bit of a technical difficulty before the show. It's the Squatchable episode 100. Let the madness commence.
Naughty boys in nasty schools, headmasters breaking all the rules, having fun and playing fools, smashing up the woodwork tools. All the teachers in the pub, passing round a ready rub, trying not to think of when that lunchtime bell will ring again. Oh, what fun we had, but did it really turn out bad? All I learned in school was how to bend not break the rules. Oh, what fun we had, but at the time it seemed so bad, trying different ways to make a difference.
Boom, boom. See what I did there? You see what I did there? Clever.
Yeah. Sausage and a bun.
Shit,
really.
All right. Welcome to this week's edition of the Squatchable podcast, where we have still abandoned the topic of Bigfoot and instead we'll be discussing the Watcher, all hail the Watcher, and little people. Joining me from the sunny slopes of Tennessee, Nikki Sweat.
Hey.
From the volcanic magma-ridden lava field of Mount St. Helens, Bill Pullen.
How you doing?
From the toilet and later mind, Kevin.
It's all true, folks. It's all true.
And providing us the best entertainment across space and time. Chubbs.
Greetings and happy 100.
Happy 100. I hope everyone had a Merry New Year and a Merry Christmas. With that, if you enjoy Power Breakdown or the Dude Brothers or Nikki or Kevin, you may enjoy the Battle or Misadventures of Two Bigfoot. Head on over to Bigfooting with Keith and Colin, where this week the lads will attempt to complete their New Year's resolutions. Spoiler alert, they don't. Without further ado, I am your host, Richard James Allen. Let's get on with it. Our first story is, of course, The Watcher. All hail The Watcher. Did you guys do any research about this?
I did.
Thanks, Chubbs.
I know the story.
Phil knows the story. All right. Well, for those of you who don't know, this is a very recent case. Happened in 2014 and concluded in about 2017. But the beginning is pretty simple. In June 2014, Maria and Derek Broaddus bought a house in Westfield, New Jersey. The number of the house was 657 Boulevard. It was a beautiful 6-bedroom large town.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You have to say like 657 Boulevard.
Yeah, well, I was gonna save the creepy voice for the letters, but
I see where you're heading with this.
Yeah. See what
The Watcher is it's a scary story.
Yeah, it is. I can hardly wait.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful 6-bedroom large townhouse. You know, they're worth about $1 million. They're pretty happy with it. I'd be pretty happy with that. Anyway, 3 days after the house sold, a mysterious letter arrived at the house.
Here we go.
Before the Broadduses had even moved in. It read,
"Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood."
No. Keep going. Just like that. That's great.
Okay.
657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the house history of the house? Who am I? There are hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard every day. Maybe I am in one. Look at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I am in one. Look out of all the many windows from 657 Boulevard at all the people that walk past. Maybe I am one. You have children. I have seen them. So far, I think there are 3 that I have counted. Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family, or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will go to them and draw them to me. The author signed the letter with a cursive font. The Watcher.
Fuck. Okay. Okay.
Hold on, guys.
Did he go? Right. Ooh, I need a water. Okay. Whew, that was rough on the old throat right there. But anyway, after you received such a horrible letter that was brilliantly narrated in a really creepy voice, you'd obviously be concerned, and so were they. So they contacted the former owners of the house, the Woodses, and asked if they'd gotten any odd letters. The Woods said they hadn't, except for a few days before they moved out. They received a similar themed letter. They never felt uncomfortable at the house, and they reported that it always felt warm and welcoming to them, so they just thought the note was from a crank and threw it away, as you would. This was, to me, now we're all Bigfooters here. We've all watched Bigfoot videos and they've hooked us. We've gone, oh, this is good. And then at some point during the video, you'll see a red flag pop up and you'll go, oh, this is just another hoax. For me, the fact that the former owners of the house had never received a letter hit me as a red flag to this story. And I got a little bit suspicious. But the story continues that, still, the Broaddusses in the Woods decided to go to the police, who told them not to tell anyone about it, as all of their neighbours were suspects. So they couldn't tell anyone about it, they couldn't discuss it, so the case was largely unknown. 2 weeks after that, another letter arrived, this one including more weird specific details about the family. Now, I could not find a copy of the second letter anywhere. So I'm sorry I won't be able to read it to you in the Watcher voice.
He says that just so he doesn't have to read it to you in the Watcher voice.
No. There was a total of 4 letters.
Yeah.
A total of 4 letters sent, and there's only a copy of the first and last one. The other 2 I could only just find details.
Let me see what I could find here.
So,
now there was I think that the Broaddusses actually sued the Woods under.
We're getting a little help ahead of us.
Oh, okay. No, I'll let you finish then. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So this was another red flag that the Watcher seemed to know so many specific details about the family, even though they hadn't actually moved in yet, which was a little weird to me again. But the family, decided not to bring their kids to the house anymore, and indeed delayed moving into the house. Third letter arrived a few weeks later asking where they'd gone. By the end of the year, the police investigation had completely stalled. There weren't any real evidence. There was no fingerprints on the letter, no DNA, no nothing. So, there was nothing they could do except watch the house occasionally. But 6 months passed after that, and both Maria and Derek were suffering from paranoia and high stress and high anxiety. So they decided, you know what, screw this, we're going to sell the house, cut our losses, walk away. Unfortunately, while it wasn't complete, the full facts of the case weren't known, there was still plenty of rumours about the house, and they couldn't find a buyer. The Broaddusses were indeed extremely pissed off about this, so they sued the Woods for failing to disclose the existence of the stalker that apparently came with the house. And yet, you think people would have mentioned that. Oh, this is a lovely house, it's got a stalker, and there's a nice big garden. But no, apparently. But because they sued them, it became public knowledge because a reporter looked at the court documents and found the claim. And then, it became a viral sensation and a media circus swirled around the house. The lawsuit was eventually thrown out in 2017 as a judge deemed it was the Brothers' responsibility to fully research the house. They were completely unable to find a buyer at this point because, the media frenzy, the stalker was well known. They attempted to sell the property to a developer who wanted to tear it down and split it into two houses. The two properties would, however, be 2 feet small for the neighborhood regulations. They attempted to appeal the decision, but the neighborhood council turned them down flat. And if you read the minutes of that, they were quite vicious about it. They pretty much laughed the Broadduses out of there, which just, it seemed a little mean, but it turned out Derek Broaddus was a bit of a bad neighbor, which is probably what caused it. And the media circus had drawn a lot of attention to this quiet neighborhood, and none of the neighbors were happy about this. Hilariously, in 2018, the same council voted to allow a different neighbor to do that, exactly that, only their house would have been 6 feet too small. So it was actually smaller than the Broadduses, but the council were like, yeah, fill your boots, which I thought was hilarious. That Christmas, all the neighbors received threatening hand-delivered letters, Watcher-esque letters signed by friends of the Broaddus family. However, it later turned out that Derek Broaddus had sent them to his neighbors to, quote-unquote, show them what he would be living with. This was another red flag for me. In 2016, the Broaddus family found a new family willing to rent the home from them. However, 2 weeks after they moved in, the new family received a letter from the Watcher. It read,
Violent winds and bitter cold. To the vile and spiteful Derek and his wench of a wife, Maria. You wonder who the Watcher is. Turn around, idiots. Maybe even spoke to me, one of the so-called neighbors who has no idea who the Watcher could be. Or maybe you do know and are too scared to tell anyone. Good move. I walked by the news trucks when they took over my neighborhood and mocked me. I watched as you watched from the dark house in an attempt to find me. Telescopes and binoculars are wonderful inventions. 657 Boulevard survived your attempt at assault and stood strong with its army of supporters barricading its gates. My soldiers of the Boulevard followed my orders to a T. They carried out their mission and saved the soul of 657 Boulevard with my orders. All hail the Watcher!
May I interject something right now?
there's only one paragraph left.
Okay.
And then I'll open it up. So that's the story of the Watcher. After this, Derek and Maria just cut all ties with the house. They finally sold it in 2019. I guess it's not listed who bought it, obviously, but it did say that they sold the house finally in 2019. Now, given that the Broaddus family moved from a $300,000 house to a $700,000 house to a $1 million house, all of which were mortgaged and financed, it's pretty fair to assume that they had quite a substantial amount of debt. Plus, they have approached multiple movie studios to sell the movie rights to the Watcher. Given that Derek was found to be writing some of the letters, given that the family that didn't live there before didn't get any letters, I'm going to go ahead and say that this was an elaborate hoax. That's my view of this. Where do you guys stand? Sorry.
Well, I was gonna ask about the second letter because I think I've got the information here. Let me see here. It was this. It will be nice to have some young blood in the neighborhood. Was one statement, and then
I could find bits and pieces, but I couldn't find.
But have you read the bit about the attic?
Yeah, if they're going to live in the attic or are they going to live in the basement where no one could hear them scream. And there was also a bit about one of the kids being an artist. But as I said, I could only find bits and pieces.
Well, I've got a lot of it here. Will they sleep? Will they sleep in the attic, or will you all sleep on the second floor? who has the bedrooms facing the street. I'll know as soon as you move in. It will help me to know who is in which bedroom. Then I can plan better. All of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I am the watcher and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on and kindly sold it when I asked them to.
All hail the Watcher.
Now, what did you say? When did it start? 2009, you said?
2014.
Oh, okay. All right then. So I was wondering if it was. It is weird that they went from once. Mostly people don't make that jump between a $300,000 house to a $700,000 house unless they've, and unless you've had, a big lifestyle change or an inheritance or something like that. So
yeah, that's kind of serious longer.
Yeah, and I think you're right in a way that I think maybe that the stress of buying a house and realizing what your mortgage is going to be actually probably put a lot of strain on the marriage. And so, but somehow they managed to pay the mortgage of that house and still live somewhere else. So like I said, how can you do that? I mean, it's almost like they were living a double life somehow anyway. Like maybe there's more to the Broaddus's story than we know, because I mean, the only people that I know that can do that are mobsters and drug dealers that can have 2 big houses, or somebody that's living a double life. And so that's the thing. And I guess there was some idea that that was one of the neighbors maybe had like a mentally deranged kid that used to come across their property, an older man.
Yeah, he's 60 years old. He was 60 years old at the time.
Yeah, okay. So sort of a a mentally, challenged person who used to come up and go across there. I mean, that might be just something that they play into it. When you go along with all hoaxes, sometimes people will do things that actually will aid in your cause. And that's got nothing to do with it, but it really sort of works out into the story going from one to the other. But I think that's a terribly cruel thing to do to your children. I mean, that's emotional abuse to do that.
There's the other side of the coin, though. I mean, they did mention that the person next door, I can't remember their name, but the son was 60 years old, and he wasn't violent or anything of that nature, but he was a bit what the people around the area called odd. He was an odd person. And I can see someone like that doing it. And I think that we also need to consider that the first letter from the Watcher was actually sent to the Woods before they moved out.
Yeah. Well, it could be. And then there was another thing that maybe the neighbors didn't want anybody, didn't like the people that were moving in. I mean, it's just an odd thing. But
I think it's a matter of control, to be honest. I think it's a matter that this old man, he's basically trapped in his own little life, in his own little house, maybe even his own little room. And he gets out once in a while, and he wants to feel as if he's in control of something beyond himself, and just decided that he would, if he can't really associate with the neighbors, the new neighbors, on a one-to-one basis, face-to-face, perhaps he can find some kind of control over them by coming up with these weird letters.
And if he's stuck in the house, maybe he's just bored. I mean, Richard and I have a sick sense of humor. If we were 60 and stuck in the house and didn't have anything else to do, we might do that.
Right.
We would totally stalk.
And then just laugh hysterically and be like,
Even though the police had contacted this guy, the old guy, the 60-year-old,
Mr. Lanford.
They interrogate. Well, they questioned him. They didn't interrogate him, but they questioned him, and they determined that he was not a suspect.
They ruled him out.
And in my thinking, I'm thinking that what they actually had done was question him, and then just ruled out that he was a violent person.
Right. Because I mean, I don't know that much about laws, especially, whenever it comes to, American laws, but it seems like you can always find these different shows or TV programs like I've Got the Neighbor from Hell, or, it seems like these people, you can literally get away with almost torturing somebody mentally and get away with it, as long as you're not like infringing on their property or something. I mean, I like it's a weird thing where what could you legally do at a certain point in time, even if he was sending you the letter?
Well, that is harassment. No, under the law, at least in the 2 states that I've served, that is harassment. It's communications without any kind of communication without purpose.
Right.
So,
But
if it's a telephone call and they're just making noise on the phone, or he sends a letter that's, this one was like a feigned threat or something of that nature, doesn't identify himself, that is technically a harassment.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, I think at least in Washington, because I've had to get an anti-harassment order against somebody, you have to tell them twice before. But if you don't know who it is, then how can you get an anti-harassment order against somebody?
Well, you don't. You just file a case for harassment, and then they investigate.
Right.
Someone from the chat pointed out one of the other neighbors did get a watcher letter as well. But it's important to point out that nobody got any letters until the Broaddus's were involved. The Woodses didn't, that random neighbor, and the Broaddus's themselves. None of them got a letter until the Broaddus's were moving into the street, which for me is a bit of a, plus the fact that he was caught sending them letters to other people.
Right.
And, the old dude that lived next door, he was ruled out as a suspect. There was one other suspect, a kid called the Gamer, who's just identified as the Gamer in the suspect pool. The police brought him in for questioning, but he didn't show up, which was kind of dodgy, I guess.
I think the thing that is missing is that there had to have been some police report taken, whereas they had reported to them possible suspects that are sending the letters, quote unquote, and having some problems with the neighbors, and would point out that fact in the police report, or the neighbors who were contacted would say something about this couple that moved in, like he's a jerk, he's an asshole, we don't get along, blah blah blah. But maybe they were afraid to say anything for fear of themselves being portrayed as a suspect. So it could be that, yeah, the guy was a jerk, but I don't see any evidence so far that of any real problems between him and the other neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah, there weren't any problems until the whole thing was blown up and then all the news trucks arrived. I mean, that annoyed a lot of the neighbors because they wanted a small, quiet neighborhood, and suddenly you got news trucks everywhere. They got quite arsy about that.
I mean, could we rule out any sort of racial characteristics or anything like that? That somebody wouldn't want maybe a certain type of, race of people living.
They weren't a certain type of people, though.
Oh no, you know what I mean. I'm saying that some people, would be like, I'm not having any Asians living in my neighborhood or something like that, or whatever.
They were white.
So so they were white living in a white neighborhood, and so yeah, okay. Well, I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing. I mean, if it was me and I was going to, look at it, I would want to know way more about them, because I think Richard's right than I would. I mean, like, the story of the Broadduses is the story almost. The Watcher is sort of inconsequential. I'd want to know way more about them than I would even about.
Right. Well, that's where it starts. So that's the first place you have to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just the whole thing just seems so weird. Like he says he's been watching the house for 100 years, but nobody else has ever heard of him until they move in. They're up to their neck in financial troubles. They certainly did well out of it. They did plenty of news interviews, plenty of TV interviews. They tried to sell the rights to the movie. I think they might have ended up doing that. There's just too many red flags for me. I mean, I could be completely wrong. Maybe I'm just cynical and jaded.
You are,
From too
but
many years
that's
looking
just
at
you.
bad Bigfoot videos. But the whole thing just screams of an elaborate hoax to me, like it's a con. That's my
Yeah.
opinion. Nikki,
I
I've already said it, but has Chubbs went?
no, Chubbs hasn't gone yet. Chubbs, bring us your opinion from space and time.
That's right. Well, I got two things I can say. One, the letters were quite quite spooky. Whoever did it really know how to put the right things in there. Like one of the letters had like what secrets lie inside the walls, and that was kind of neat. But um, they said that the watcher knew like the nicknames of the children. So to me, that was kind of a red flag, like an inside job.
Yeah, that was a bit. You see, that was the other thing. I mean, he knew an awful lot about them, and they hadn't even moved into the house yet.
right. But if
I
you
mean,
truly
okay,
were,
stalkers do their homework, obviously, but
if you truly were the watcher and you were a psycho,
No, he
I
didn't.
mean,
He
if I
didn't
was
know.
a,
He
if
didn't
I
know
was,
the nicknames till later.
yeah, but I'm saying if I was a psycho and I wanted to scare the crap out of somebody, knowing that they hadn't moved into the house, I'd bug the hell out of it. I'd put in a transmitter so I could listen to what their names were.
Could be a real estate agent. I mean, you get your commission from selling it to them the first time, and then they sell it because they're freaked out, and you get the commission from them selling it.
Aha!
Ha ha!
Nikki's correct.
I've solved it.
Okay,
Yeah,
Nancy Drew.
You said there were two things, Chubbs. What was the other thing?
Oh no, well, one was the way they wrote the letters, and the other was them knowing the names, their nicknames, not just their like regular names of the kids.
Okay.
But
Come
I
on.
will say, I don't know how they thought they could get away with it all the way, like, up, it was 2014, like, in an age where fingerprints can easily be done and handwriting and you name it. Like, that's kind of hard to get away with something like that. So I give them credit for trying.
Yeah, it's easy to get away with it, believe it or not.
Oh.
Well, you would think that the cost factor of what a police department is willing to spend on something, there are wonderful techniques in play, but sometimes it's right. I think it gets too. I'm not going to criticize anybody because that's probably it is, but police departments have budgets too, and maybe they're using that for something else.
Well, I know. I mean, I've investigated cases where the only evidence was a piece of paper, a note, or a letter, but that just cost a can of Nin hydrant to spray on the thing, so that the prints show up on the paper. So that's not a big thing. The thing is trying to find enough of the print for identification purposes, and then compare it with the prints that are on file for other criminals. And that's the problem, because you can run it through APHIS and it probably come up nothing. You can have nine points of identification on a thumbprint, for example, but you need like 13. So it's really hard to make, almost impossible to make a case on fingerprints. The only case that our department has ever made on fingerprints is a burglar who was using latex gloves, and when he exited the window, he took the gloves off. So all we had to do was turn the gloves inside out and make prints from that. We got a whole set.
What an idiot!
We left the gloves at the crime scene.
Yeah, right.
Wow. He deserved to get caught.
He really did.
You really did.
America's dumbest criminal right there. So that wraps up The Watcher, a creepy case of stalking or an elaborate hoax.
An elaborate hoax.
What you guys can decide. Before we move on to our next topic, take a moment to talk about Planet Fear, Matt Knapp's new podcast. Matt Knapp reached out to him earlier in the week and he informed me that it's not actually available on YouTube, but it is available on all podcast platforms. So Planet Fear, I listened to last week's show, it was pretty damn good. But I've listened to Matt Knapp read the weather, so as I'm sure everybody else would. That'll wrap us up the old plug this week. Kevin, little people, go.
Well, I'm gonna say this. I technically believe everything I'm going to say, about my personal experiences and everything like that. That doesn't mean that I'm expecting anybody else to believe it or whatever. But I first got into paranormal stuff because of an experience I had when I was a child, and and
at the Versailles Palace by chance.
No, it didn't happen at the Palace of Versailles. I've got a story about that another time. But it was up in the woods, and I saw what I considered to be what I had imagined was a leprechaun, 2 to 3 foot thing running around in the woods. My mom was with me and everything like that. And then I had a strange experience that happened after that. I was raised as sort of a Christian druid. My mom obviously had a lot of knowledge about, secret knowledge and things like that I was told. And, and that supposedly had gone for millennia back on that side. So I can't tell you that what I was told was true as far as all that goes, but it was all orally passed down to me and everything like that. However, so my main thing that I always wanted to try to find out about was little people, fae, and fairy rings or fairy winds. Okay, so consequently, because this happened in the early 70s, before Close Encounter and everything like that, I had no basis to understand that people were really seeing things like gray aliens, 2 to 3 feet tall aliens, and things like that around. And I, then started to research it and find out that, in most mythologies and things like that, there is a huge similarity between fairy abductions and alien abductions, and some of the things that aliens do and some of the things that fairies supposedly do. Now, I'm speaking of fairies not in the way that most people think of them. I'm not talking about Tinkerbell and the Disneyfication of everything like that. I'm not even talking about the cottage leaf fairies that
You're
was a
talking about
hoax.
the assholes.
Well, I'm talking about the fact that there are supposedly beings that come into our world, and there seems to have been beings that come into our world from where nobody knows. I mean, we assume now that they come into our world from another planet, which actually probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. In the fact that if you were going to do that, would you really travel here in a spaceship? Because the whole idea of space, time, and warp speed and everything like that
Space
is so far
and time.
Well, yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Space and time would be the thing. So, I almost went back. I mean, I didn't find out about this until about 10 or 15 years ago that Jacques Vallée, who's was an author, wrote about medieval people's abduction stories with fairies and how similar that was to UFO abductions and things like that, because you really didn't have, and he talks about it in a book called The Passage to Magonia. That was the place that the people were supposedly taken to and then brought back. But so the thing that sort of cracks it is that we've always had this idea of these super beings that come into our worlds and do things and leave. Now, that's one of the reasons that I went to go see Matt Johnson's thing, because I was really trying to take a look at it from, because he'd started talking about portals and things like that. And that actually interested me. Well, it interested me in the idea of,
Kevin.
no, I know. I'm just explaining it because obviously I'm not giving him credit for this. I'm not giving him credit. I'm just saying that.
Well, you can't, because everything he's said is borrowed from somewhere else.
Right. And so what I'm saying is that, people tell a story and then they say, this is what happens. And then you want to go up and you say, okay, this did happen or it didn't happen. But my theory is almost that it's what we're seeing is interdimensional transposition. In other words, why would an alien be interested in what we do on this planet if it wasn't living on this planet? In other words, it's just in another, I mean, if you think about gods and we think about different things like that, they basically have the ability to either transfer into our reality and then go back, phase in and phase out. Sometimes when you're talking about fairy stuff and alien stuff, it seems like they're not doing anything other than just sort of there for a while. Or ghosts, they look at you, they're surprised as you are, and then they go away. And so this theory of piezoelectric, magnetism that I sort of have developed, that goes along with other people's things, is like, is the crystal in the ground, is the crystalline structure of certain locations causing us to see things from the past, like a tape recorder that's showed up on the thing. In other words, it's not really there. And so what I want to say about that is people want to know about fairies and, how to get away from a fairy and the fact that fairies go underground and then disappear to their own realm and all that stuff. I'd be happy to talk about it. How to stop a fairy from abducting your kid. I mean, I can tell you all the folklore behind that. But what I'd really like to do is talk about the fact that, are we, as Sasquatchers or people who are seeing ghosts or people who believe in alien abductions, some of those are, I mean, obviously, I don't think that all of those cases are that, but are we actually falling through into another sort of dimensional state for a while and then coming back? Or are they doing that and then leaving? I mean, do they know that they're even doing it? And maybe that's why some of these creatures that we talk about are so aggressive towards us, because, like if I'm sitting in my house and then all of a sudden I'm taken to somewhere else, I'm going to be pissed off about it. I'm going to charge somebody. But this is just one of those things where I just wanted to have a discussion. So really, I've said everything I want to talk about, and I just want to get everybody else's ideas about it.
Well, no, if I had spoke to Secret Agent 98.6 about, are you referring to the theory of the magnetic universe, the electric universe?
Well, not necessarily that, just that we can live in other words, we have a limited spectrum of vision and senses. And so if we were to see in the ultraviolet, for example, or other things like that, could we then be more knowledgeable about other things that live in the same space we do? In other words, I could be surrounded by people in this room, quite frankly, right now. You know what I mean? I could be surrounded by the ancestors. I could be surrounded by the ghosts. I could be surrounded by, technically Bigfoot or whatever. You just can't see them. But what I'm saying is, are these beings coming from without, or are they coming from here, just passing over to what we can see? I guess that's what I'm talking about.
Well, it's an interesting hypothesis, isn't it? I mean, when you have what some would consider like a rip where something becomes visual to our senses momentarily and then disappears when it closes, type of thing. But I think it's just like what you were saying, as far as, let's say a tape recording.
Mhm.
Whereas you have a tape recorder and you're recording on the old tape, and it's not, and then you record over it, and it's not completely erased, so that when you play it back again, you're going to hear a ghosting of what was on the tape prior to the current recording. I think that's the best way that I've heard it explained. And I experienced, let's say, radio signals, which have been trapped in between the F1, F2 layers of the atmosphere that just circle the Earth. And then, decades later can bounce right back down and be heard. And that happened to me when I was a radioman.
Mm-hmm.
Actual recordings, and I'm not talking about a replaying of a 1940s show. I'm talking about an actual show with the commercials and everything from around 1942 or so that we could hear.
Wow.
And this has been known to happen, and I've heard other radiomen talk about this thing happening. So if this can happen, if something can become trapped in one layer, a layer of something that we cannot see or hear, and then because of atmospherics or other conditions, and the conditions could be Earth related or could be related outside of Earth, just right to the point where something can reappear.
Right. I think that, it's a delicate subject for me, because it's almost like open the floodgates, all hoaxers have a way to go now. You see, that's why I don't think anybody talks about it in a lot of ways, is because that theory, you can't prove it unless we understand a lot more things about, you know, dimensions and how they all work. I mean, we all know,
it can't be reproduced. We can't reproduce it.
right?
We can't explain it. We don't know how it works, if it works. All we have is to go on is observation, and the observation is only the here and now where we're concerned, and therefore it can't be tested.
Right. And I think that that's interesting about it, because I think that I mean, again, I'll say this, that I think that it's people and locations seem to be able to channel into these things. I mean, I don't necessarily know if I was the catalyst of my experiences. It could have been my mom, because I don't have directly weird experiences unless I was with my mom, and now currently with my wife. She does all kinds of crazy crap just sort of happens, and I can't really explain it. Although I have been taught sort of the whole sort of theoretical idea of druidry, and and different ideas like that. There's practical aspects to it that you have to learn, but I'm not a practitioner of it. And when I meet certain people who seem to be able to just do it naturally, I think that that's the weird part about it, I've literally gone all over the world trying to talk to shaman and people to just try to explain what this could be, what happened to me when I was a little kid. And so it's very, very bizarre in the fact that, sometimes you can show up at a place and you say, okay, well, like I've said about certain Bigfooters, they believe it. It doesn't mean that that they're telling the truth. It means to them, they believe it. That's all you can ever say about people. But then you can say about, well, why is this happening? And what's the one thing that you can put together in that seems to be the thing that makes it happen? And it seems to be a combination of geological factors like Stonehenge or granite, or quartz or whatever, and a person that seems to unknowingly manipulate that or not. I mean, or whatever. Maybe I'm hallucinating whenever I'm in those positions, but I don't know. So that's I mean, I'm sure Richard's chomping at the bit to say something.
No, this is your topic, man.
No, I'm just no. I actually wanted people's opinions because obviously, I thought, well, Chubbs might have an opinion about it because he lives in the sort of voodoo land of down there where things weird stuff happens. I mean,
Well, I can tell you, really not much to do with where I am, but I do believe personally that there could be a multiverse and other dimensions, and the person that people might see on the videos with me, the other dude, brother Max, we have a saying that we will help people with anything, no matter what. And we've been actually called to go look for werewolves with people, and you name it. And one of the times, a young lady who she was really in tune with, like, you could say, like the earth. She taught me and Max that if you see a circle of mushrooms on the ground, that's where fairies drink their milk. So I don't, we'll go look for anything or help anybody. And because when it comes to Bigfoot, all the stories, no matter what, aliens, you name it, we take it as okay. I don't really care what you say you saw or what you're looking for. We just want to help because that's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of anything. I wish more people thought like that because all people do is want to criticize other people. But yeah, I don't think anything's out of possibility because like energy can't be created or destroyed. So something has to go, everything has to go somewhere. And I've seen my share of things like Ghost and I've, you name it. And there's got to be something to it. So why not? I don't think anything's, I think pop culture has ruined a couple things, like when it comes to like the Fey folk or, the idea of like say leprechauns, like everything's been or werewolves, vampires, the stories come from somewhere, but pop culture has changed things to what we see in the movies or whatnot. But I've met people who are empaths to the point where they can read people to a T. And is that a gift or are they just that smart?
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. That was
No, I appreciate what you're saying is, and if I was conspiratorial, I'd say that was the media trying to make a joke out of everything serious that has to do with the paranormal. So we all do look like idiots. And then at that point in time, nobody actually does any scientific sort of, even though it would be classified as pseudoscience, nobody does any kind of, or tries to quantify people's experiences. I mean, the most I know about it is whenever people the God helmet, for example, where they make this helmet that goes on your head and they basically can induce these sort of feelings of not religious ecstasy. I was almost misspoke there, but and so that they can sort of induce this sort of thing using magnets. And so that's why I think like that. But what do you think, Nikki?
I am full of woo when it comes to stuff like that. I don't necessarily believe in fairies per se. But I'm with you. Like if it's something like that, it's either an interdimensional thing or like with me and a lot of because I used to spiritually clean houses. I think that sometimes those are just like Phil was saying, kind of an echo of something that had previously happened. Like I do believe in emotional imprinting on a place when something traumatic has happened. I believe that you can absolutely imprint something, and it might replay itself because it's now burned into wherever that realm is. Like I do believe in a multiple dimension. We don't know everything. We're constantly finding new things every day when it comes to science.
Right.
So I am with you. Like when it comes to supernatural stuff, I definitely believe in it, but I also believe that a lot of things like aliens and whatnot are actually multidimensional.
Right.
I don't think that they're coming from Mars or like several planet, galaxies over. I think that most things are in a dimension we can't see.
Yeah. And and like I said, it's a thing that is very interesting because of the fact that, and that's one of the reasons why whenever I talk about my experiences, I always try to tell I mean, if anybody wants to know, about my, my background, or, my, uh, the medicines I'm on, even that, that where I can say, okay, I'm on this medicine, this medicine, this medicine, and this medicine, or whatever. Make your determinations about whether I'm hallucinating or not, because I'm not sort of tied to the story as much as I'm wanting the explanation. And I think that I've spoken to a lot of people, and the most people that I talk to that I seem to get to jive with, like I get on a level. It's like they're not making YouTube videos. They're just trying to say, what could it be? I mean, part of the thing about it was at a certain point in time, you had to, at a certain, before the internet, really before YouTube, you kind of had to go to somebody like Unexplained Mysteries or whatever, America's Greatest Mysteries, or some program like that, where they would try to talk about it and sort of develop a theory about what it could be. And so, or they never just did talk about it, or whatever. But then I think that part of the thing is, uh, but then you're always afraid of, is this a mental disorder that I've got? Is this coming from this type of mental defect that I have
Right.
that's causing it? And so people, like for example, I've told Richard this, that I have a relative that, close relative, not a direct family member, but one that's, let's just say one group away from being a brother or a sister, who has schizophrenia. And so, at that point in time, I've talked to him about different types of things, and you know, um, he has some great insights to it. As far as experiences. If I've said, were you ever at Papa and Nana's shop and this happened? And he would say, yes, that did happen to me too. But I mean, but then he would say, but don't ever tell who I am or what my things is, because I don't want to be sort of,
The
thought
crazy
of it.
person.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, it's so easy for people to dismiss the, and I know this because I'm a diabetic too, and sometimes whenever I have emotions, people will say to me, oh, you got low blood sugar, you're not really feeling that way, or you got
Right.
high
Oh,
blood
you're
sugar.
schizophrenic. Oh,
or,
you're in a
or yeah,
manic
yeah,
state,
yeah,
bipolar.
that's
You're just seeing stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's just easy to
Yeah.
just say away. So I
Hey,
mean, that's,
real quick,
yeah,
I can tell you that I have two nephews that are cops. They're avid hunters, done it their whole life. I brought up Bigfoot one time, and at first they laughed, and I said, "Well, have you ever, had anything weird happen?" And one of them's like, now that you mention it, I did hear a scream this one time, and they went off telling me stuff. So people can laugh, but then once you get down to it, so a lot of people will like bring up things they can't explain.
right. And I
Allow
think
me to
that,
wrap us up here with an
yeah.
anecdote. for
Okay, go
recently.
ahead.
So I'm not tight with a lot of my family, as Nikki will tell you, but my wife's sister had a daughter called Zoe, who I was very, very attached to. I taught her how to play chess. I was super tight with that girl, and she was murdered. Um, the night she died, I was awoken at about midnight by a long, low scream coming from the top of my trailer. Now, it could have been a dream, it could have all been a coincidence, but my mum told me that when she was a little girl and her grandmother died, she was awoken by the same low scream coming from the top of her house. Now,
We call them whaleys. Go ahead.
can't explain that at all. And yeah, was it a banshee? Was it just a coincidence? I don't know.
Well, folklore would say it was a banshee, and banshees only come to people who are truly Irish. They don't come to, that's a thing that everybody doesn't realize, that in Irish folklore, even if you're an Anglo-Norman, they don't come. You have to be Celtic Irish, or they don't. You don't hear the banshee. So, and I know you are.
But
I
yeah,
must be part. I have seen them.
you don't see them, you hear them.
No, you can see them.
No, you never see them, you hear them.
Okay.
Yeah, banshees do come riding on a horse with red eyes.
Oh, I hate both of you. I was just trying to wrap up with a little anecdote. You guys have to just stump
Well,
all over.
maybe it's the horse that's the banshee.
Maybe the horse is whinnying.
No, or maybe it's just there's all kinds of ideas where people, they say that the soul has weight. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not. No. But if it does, the energy can do things. I mean, I don't know.
Hey, we all have deja vu. Try and explain that off,
It's when your left brain realizes something your right brain already knows.
Left and right brain is unscientific, though. You're welcome.
I don't like you, Nikki.
I don't like you either.
At all, even a little bit.
Get off the show.
You're done. You're done.
Well, that's a tragic story, and that bummed me out, man. You bummed me out with that story.
Sorry.
No, I mean,
plain thing that I've got going on.
Yeah. Well, no, I almost wish I had a half an hour to tell how I shit my pants.
Bring it back.
I will. Yeah, bring it back next week. And I'll mine. You can tell everybody the story about you shitting your pants.
Yeah. I'll tell you that story. That is a young adult memory.
I think it's a myth.
No, that happened.
Legend. It's a legend.
I do have confirmation.
The legend of the Versailles Palace.
Yes. The Hall of Mirrors got to see a lot of me.
Righty then. That'll wrap us up for this week. We will return next week, despite the hopes of many, for our 101st episode. Not as catchy as 100. What will we be talking about, I hear you ask? We will be talking about the incredibly twisty-turny case of Gypsy Road Blanchard and the psychopathic madness of one man with McCamey Manor. That's coming up next week.
And Bigfoot.
And yeah, we might rag on Matt Johnson. It'll be that time of the month. Yeah. I'll leave you with this awesome album.
Happy New Year's, everybody.
Happy New Year's.
Happy 100th episode.
That's right.
Oh yeah, we will. Yeah, and Chubb will no doubt be doing something, bringing you the best entertainment across space and time.
That's right.
Next week, lads. Toodles.
Good night, everybody.